What I think is necessary for the country now, what the country needs, is calm leadership. That's exactly what I'm providing, and I'm providing that with the full support of my cabinet.
The Prime Minister stands firm as the former Tory party chairman says there are growing numbers of MPs who say she should resign.
It's an opinion which is shared by, though not vocally and publicly, by many ministers and even cabinet ministers.
Ben Stokes won't travel to Australia with the England cricket squad in October for the Ashes after an alleged fight in Bristol. Growth forecasts are cut and productivity is down, a warning for the economy and the Chancellor. But there's a boost to the motor industry as Toyota announces plans to build a new model in Britain. Stars of Coronation Street gather for the funeral of soap actress Liz Dawn. A very good afternoon to you. Theresa May is resisting growing pressure to step down, saying that she intends to carry on providing the country with calm leadership. It follows claims by the former Conservative Party chairman that there's growing support among MPs for a leadership contest. That's following her disastrous conference speech on Wednesday. Speaking from her constituency, the Prime Minister said she still has the backing of her cabinet.
Look, I've had a cold all this week, but I'm here today at a fantastic event that is raising money to support people and their families who are going through real difficulty. Calm leadership, that's exactly what I'm providing, and I'm providing that with the full support of my cabinet. Thank you.
But the former Conservative Party chairman, Grant Shapps, disputed that claim.
This is not about me or anyone else on that list. A great opportunity to renew.
So how exactly could Theresa May be replaced? Well, according to Conservative Party rules, a leadership contest can be triggered in two ways. Firstly, by resignation, but if the leader wants to stay, what happens next? Well, an election can be called if 15% of Tory MPs write to the chairman of the 1922 committee, which is made up of backbench Conservative MPs, saying no longer have the confidence in the leader. So 48 out of the current party's 318 MPs would need to hold that view. Once those numbers have been reached, nominations are called for and a candidate needs the support of at least 2 MPs to get onto the ballot paper. If there's only one candidate, they'll be declared the winner, but if there's multiple candidates, voting rounds then begin. Now, in each round, the candidate with the least votes is knocked out until only 2 remain. Conservative members then have a final vote and the winner becomes the new leader. And of course, when David Cameron resigned following the EU referendum in 2016, 5 MPs stood for leadership. Mrs May and Andrea Leadsom were due to go to the ballot, but Mrs May became the leader after Mrs Leadsom pulled out of the race. Let's get more on this now from our political correspondent Tom Rayner, who's in Westminster for us. And Tom, one MP has said that Theresa May will go by the end of the weekend, but of course Theresa May coming out in the last hour or so, pretty defiant, pretty confident.
Yes, she was. She said that she was offering calm leadership and that she had the full backing of her cabinet. And clearly the fact that she has felt able to say that, the fact that we have heard from cabinet ministers over the course of the day, that can be taken, including the path of sticking with Theresa May. OK,
Tom, thanks ever so much. Well, we conducted a Sky Data poll about the Prime Minister's performance, and here are the results. Well, we asked first of all, would it be good or bad for the Conservatives if Theresa May is leader at the next general election? 30% said good, 43% said bad, and 15% said neither, with the remainder of people saying they didn't know. Now, those numbers in the brackets show how today's answers compare to when we asked exactly the same question just over a month ago. And as you can see, good is up by 2%, bad down by 2%, and neither down by 3%. Our second question we then asked, is Theresa May a strong or weak leader? Strong came out at 44%, weak at 52%, and the remaining 4% said they didn't know. And then finally we asked, what did you think of Theresa May's conference speech? Well, 39% of people said good, 40% of people said it was bad, and then 21% said that they didn't know. New figures have shown that UK productivity has fallen well behind the world's biggest economies. The Office for National Statistics reports that productivity was 15.1% below the G7 average in 2016. Labour productivity fell by 0.1% in the second quarter of 2017. That's up from 0.5% fall in the first quarter. Well, the Office for Budget Responsibility is expected to release new predictions next week, which could wipe up to two-thirds of a £26 billion contingency fund created to form a buffer zone in public finances as Brexit approaches. Our business presenter Ian King has the details from our City studio.
Confirms really a trend that we've seen since the financial crisis. UK productivity, as measured by output per worker per hour, has not really improved since the financial crisis.
Indeed, and Ian, in the last episode, we've heard a new possible Toyota deal for the UK. How significant would you say that is?
Well, this is a report that's on the Reuters news agency. It's really a rather speculative piece. It says that the Japanese car maker Toyota intends to build the next generation Aris car at its British car plant on the assumption that the government will secure a transitional Brexit deal. Now, a transitional deal with the EU on Brexit.
Ian King with those details there. The Spanish government has passed a decree making it easier for businesses to move out of Catalonia. The move could deal a serious blow to the autonomous region's finances as it considers declaring independence. Government ministers have asked Catalonia's leader, Charles Puigdemont, to come back into line with Spanish law.
We're talking about millions, or many thousands, millions of people even, that are asking for us to come back.
The UK government is proposing a total ban on the sale of ivory in an attempt to crack down on illegal poaching. There'll be a 12-week public consultation period. The WWF says a total ban on the trade needs to be implemented within the next year. In Africa, one elephant is killed for its tusks every 26 minutes. The boss of Ryanair has reportedly written a letter apologising to the airline's pilots, offering them incentives to stay with the carrier. The letter, leaked to the Irish press, suggests that Michael O'Leary has promised pay increases and significant improvements to contracts and career progression for pilots at the airline. The move follows a cancellation of tens of thousands of flights due to a pilot rostering error. Over half of the cancer drugs approved by the European Medicines Agency in the last few years came onto the market without clear evidence that they could improve the quality of life for patients. Researchers say that in almost two-thirds of cases, there was no conclusive evidence the drugs improved survival rates. The Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. Berit Reiss-Andersen, the Nobel Committee chair, said it was because of the group's groundbreaking efforts to reduce the number of nuclear weapons.
We live in a world where the risk for nuclear weapons being used is greater than it has been for a long time. Some states are modernizing their nuclear arsenals, and there is a real danger that more countries will try to procure nuclear weapons, as exemplified by North Korea.
An inquest has found that an absence of maintenance played a part in the death of a woman who was killed by failing roof panels. Tony Martin was hit by a piece of timber during Storm Doris in Wolverhampton city centre in February. The inquest found the panel came loose because of the rot and defective fixtures. Well, let's return now to our top story, where Theresa May is resisting growing pressure to step down, saying that she intends to carry on providing the country with calm leadership. Well, let's go live now to Westminster, where we can speak to Sean Worth, director of the Westminster Policy Institute. He's also David Cameron's former advisor. Very good afternoon to you. First off, what do you make of these comments from Grant Shapps saying he and around 30 other MPs want her to resign?
Look, when I was at Conservative Party conference this week, I certainly picked up that quite a few MPs are disgruntled. They're, upset that there was a general election, hung Parliament. Essentially, the Tory Party lost. But the majority of people, I think, yes, they want to send a message to Theresa May. We need to up our game and we need to stay on top of things, and we need probably a better performance from conference than the one that they had, regardless of all the coughing. The speech didn't have a great deal of content in it. There wasn't much policy, so that I think that they want to send a bit of a message to her team. But I don't see that the majority of people, from what I can see, talking to people and looking at what's going on, really want to shove her out. proactively. So I think the Grant Shapps thing is quite strange, to be honest with you.
We understand the leak came from a whip, which is pretty unusual in itself, isn't it?
Very unusual, yeah. I mean, if it did come from the whips, then there's probably some reason why they're doing that. That Grant Shapps is trying to cause trouble and hasn't got a great deal of support. I think that's probably the case, to be honest with you. As I said, not one I've spoken to probably about 50 MPs in the course of the last 4 or 5 days, and there's a slight depression about losing the election and the state of things. But as I said, most people want Theresa May to get on with the job of delivering the Brexit negotiation process. And then they are looking past her, to be honest. They are looking at who could take over next. But the idea of kind of knifing her right now on the back of a conference speech where she, all she did really was have a cold and not do a very good job, it would just look really bad. And there isn't really any political pressure to force that to happen. If you look at the polling today, the main parties, Labour and Tories, are pretty much neck and neck, and Theresa May still polls ahead of Corbyn in terms of who should be the best Prime Minister. So there's no political pressure, and I can't see any popular move.
There's so much infighting and squabbling in the Conservative Party. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn must be sitting back laughing, mustn't he?
Yeah, there's plenty of infighting and squabbling in his party as well. I think that's a common theme of politics right now. But the Tory party, has always been an unkind place for a leader who hasn't won an election. In any other circumstances, if you don't win, you go to a general election, you don't win, you're out. That's just the sort of unspoken rule. And if anyone tried to stay on, they'd get a leadership challenge straight away. There are very special circumstances right now, and Theresa May is still in post because she volunteered to the party that she'd take the party through the Brexit negotiation process. The party wanted her to do that. I think if the Tory party gets under genuine political pressure, where you see Labour polling massively ahead, or Corbyn, beating Theresa May on personal credibility, then you'd have a different story. But we just don't have those dynamics right now. So a move to kind of force her out on the back of a conference speech where she basically had a cold would look incredibly crass. And I think that's why most MPs are saying today in private that they want to send her a message. They want her to up her game. They want her team to up their game in particular. But they don't want to kind of knife her right now.
Well, let's talk about that conference speech. It was supposed to be the speech of a lifetime. You obviously advised David Cameron, but what advice do you give when someone gets, a frog in their throat, the set falls down, and then you're handed with a fake P45?
Well, I think that there is a question. I meyou that's a very difficult thing to manage, also, and I think she did actually quite well. You can't really prepare for that kind of stuff. It's just your personality. And your quick-wittedness, really, about having a bit of banter to deal with the guy that had the P45, and then there was some banter about the chance of giving her a lozenge, which actually went down really well. The hall was really kind to her. But, in terms of the speech itself, the preparation, I think people are looking at the content of it. There were briefings, or there was a lack of briefings to the press in the morning, and there were stories that there were going to be a big announcement on House building, which turned out to be a very small one. There was an energy price cap, which was actually reasonable, but nothing terribly nothing that would really kind of move the party forward. And I think that's what people were looking for. That wasn't apparent, and perhaps she's constrained by, she can't spend any new money. She can't do anything particularly radical because of a hung parliament and you won't pass anything. So it's tough, but there's certainly you can do a bigger job of the event of conference than that, and I think that has led to some frustration. I think that's where these calls for replacing her come from, not from her coughing and her performance. It's more the content and did it move the party forward or not.
I just want one final thought very quickly. One MP has said that she will be gone by the end of the weekend. I think that's very unlikely, but how long has she got?
Oh, I don't know. It depends. Right now, as I said, most MPs are saying, send her a message. We want a warning. We want things to improve, but let's not rock the boat too much. There's no political pressure on us right now. Some people are looking past her a bit, but as to how long she lasts, a safe bet would be to the end of the Brexit negotiations, unless the party comes under any particular pressure through the media or through the Labour Party, where a new leader is deemed to be more necessary than having stability during the Brexit process. That's a really important thing to try and keep a handle on and keep stable for. Why waste time? A leadership contest would knock 3 months out of the Brexit negotiations, and that, whatever side of the debate you're on, that's a pretty stupid thing to do unless there's a very good reason to do it.
OK, Sean Worth, thanks ever so much for your expertise. Appreciate your time. Well, let's find out now what's coming up in the sport with Nick.
Becky, 3 more England cricketers have been disciplined, and there's more news on Ben Stokes too.
.com.
Welcome back. It's been a busy day of sport. Let's get the latest from the Sky Sports News Centre.
This programme is brought to you by Vitality Health and Life Insurance. Getting active brings its own rewards.
Go for the ankles. It's as far as I can reach anyway.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Ben Stokes will not travel with the rest of the England cricket squad to Australia ahead of tomorrow's Super League Grand Final.
And that's a wrap. Marvellous. Who's sorting out these extras?
Well, it's been a nice couple of days. Let's see if it's set to continue.
From warm, flowing island winds to an enchanting desert breeze.
After a mostly fine day, cloud and rain from the Atlantic will sweep south and east across the country, leaving cloudy skies and showers, I'm afraid to say, for Saturday, but some sunny spells on Sunday. This afternoon there'll be a good deal of dry weather, but the best of it will be over eastern counties, West Wales and the southwest. Temperatures will reach 16 degrees Celsius, which will feel pretty pleasant in light winds. Cloud will steadily increase from the west, however, with much of Scotland and Northern Ireland turning wet by the end of the day.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
This is Sky News. Coming up, Saving Our Oceans. We'll be finding out how our ocean rescue campaign can help to tackle the huge amount of plastic that's in our seas. You're watching Sky News, the top stories. Theresa May insists she continues to provide calm leadership as Prime Minister after claims there's growing support among Conservative MPs for a leadership contest. Ben Stokes won't travel to Australia with the England cricket squad in October for the Ashes after an alleged fight in Bristol. New figures have shown that UK productivity has fallen behind the world's biggest economies in the first 3 months to June.
Welcome to St Julian's in Malta, where back to Rebecca.
OK, thanks ever so much for that update there, Gillian. Well, let's get more now on the drop in UK productivity. The Office for National Statistics reports that it was 15.1% below the G7 average in 2016. Labour productivity fell by 0.1% in the second quarter of 2017, and that's up from a 0.5% fall in the first quarter. Let's go live now to central London and Torsten Bell, the director of Resolution Foundation, a think tank that works to improve the living standards of those on very low incomes and middle incomes. Thanks very much for your time this afternoon. First of all, why are these figures such bad news for the Chancellor?
Well, good afternoon. I mean, the big thing today is that these figures are bad news actually for the Chancellor, because if our productivity is lower, that means in the long run our economy is smaller and it means less tax receipts coming in, and that causes problems for a Chancellor trying to balance the books. But it's not just bad news for the public finances, it's bad news for household finances too, because in the long run, no one talks about productivity around the dining table, but we do talk about our wages and our pay packets. And if as a country we're not producing more for each bit of work we do, that means we can't get paid more.
And why is the UK's productivity record so poor?
Well, the really, really painful answer to that is we don't know the exact answer to that question. There's two different chunks to it. There's why historically has Britain had been a lower productivity economy than many of our major partners. We're about 20% below some of our European comparator countries, and that's got things to do with like very poor management in the UK, low levels of investment in many of our sectors. We've tended to be focused on business models that tend to be more focused on low wage, low skill approaches rather than high investment, high wage, high skill business models. But more recently, it can't just be that. We've seen in particular since the financial crisis much weaker productivity growth, yes, around the world, but particularly here in the UK. And that has got to do with a range of things, partly possibly to do with our having a larger financial services sector during the period after a big crash like we've just seen, but it is also probably a complicated relationship between when we've seen large rises in employment in the economy, much larger than we expected to see at the time of the crash, but combined with low wages. That is encouraging firms towards hiring lots of workers but on low wages and using that labour relatively inefficiently, which is another way of saying we have low productivity. So it's a kind of a two-way street. We've got low wages leading to low productivity, but we've also got low productivity feeding into low wages in the medium term.
So you mentioned low wages. What other impact is low productivity going to have on the everyday person like you and me?
Well, I mean, in the long run, that is it. It's going to mean lower wages in the long term, but it's also going to mean, higher taxes, because in the end, we can either have we've got a given level of debt, and if we wish to get that down, we can either grow the economy to do that with higher productivity, or we see higher taxes or lower spending. That's why it matters for us, not just in our wage packets, but also in the taxes we pay and the public services we use.
And we've seen today also figures saying that we've overestimated our growth, and that's going to have a huge dent on our contingency funds. What kind of impact economically is Brexit having?
Well, there's two different things here. There's a question mark about Brexit, and the Office for Budget Responsibility has previously put in downgrades to its productivity forecasts to take into account what it sees as lower investment following the Brexit referendum. But that isn't really what the news today and the FT and then reported elsewhere about the OBR downgrading its productivity forecasts ahead of the budget that we expect is set for the end of November. That is to do with the OBR looking at the productivity forecasts they've made actually long before the Brexit referendum, since 2010, since the financial crisis, and realising that they've been over-optimistic at every single step of the way, and they keep predicting that productivity growth will pick up, and it simply hasn't. I mean, the horrible truth is, on the back of the productivity figures this morning, UK productivity is still lower than it was in 2007. That is 10 years of no progress. So that is what the OBR is expected to be setting out next Tuesday, and if that is what they say, then that will have a big impact on their forecast for the public finances. Just a few months ago, they said that if they just downgraded our productivity forecast by 0.3%, growth forecast by 0.3% a year, it would wipe out half of the roughly just under 30 billion headroom the Chancellor has in his fiscal forecast.
OK, thanks ever so much. Appreciate that, and for explaining it in a bit more detail for us. Now, the funeral of Liz Dawn, who played Vera Duckworth on Coronation Street, is taking place at Salford Cathedral. She's played the character for more than 30 years, and stars from the show will be attending. With Sky's Fraser Maud is there, and Fraser, much loved, not just in Manchester, but I suppose up and down the country, and very fond memories of her playing alongside her on-screen husband, Jack Duckworth.
Absolutely. I mean, they were an iconic pair, weren't they? Coronation Street has always set itself apart from many other soap operas by having that lightness of touch, those comedy moments. Sylvia, she was born Sylvia Butterfield. She became Sylvia Ibbotson through marriage. So whether people are here today to say goodbye to Sylvia, to Liz or to Vera, she'll clearly be very, very dearly missed.
OK, thanks ever so much, Fraser. Appreciate that. And, of course, very fond memories of watching her in Coronation Street there. Got a bit of breaking news to bring you, and David Cameron has spoken out supporting Theresa May. Of course, it's been a horrendous day for her, with Grant Shapps coming out saying around 30 MPs are supporting him, saying she should resign. But this breaking news now, David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, saying that he fully supports the Prime Minister, Theresa May. That news breaking in the last few minutes or so. Now, the gun lobby in the US says it's ready to support measures which would stop the modification of rifles, which enables Stephen Paddock to kill 58 people in Las Vegas. More stories are now emerging of how some people risked their own lives to help others when he opened fire on concert-goers from his hotel room. Our US correspondent Greg Milam has been speaking to a group of young British soldiers who gave first aid to some of the injured. Here's his report.
When they needed some rest and recuperation from combat first aid training in the desert, the troopers of the Queen's Dragoon Guards head on the streets of Las Vegas. Greg Milam, Sky News, California.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, how young people are reacting to increasing levels of debt. We'll be talking about that just after the break. Welcome back. A new Sky data poll has found that more than 2/3 of young adults are worrying about paying off their debts if interest rates rise. The increasing findings come as a number of people are forced to use credit cards to make essential purchases. Sky's business correspondent Adam Parsons has this report.
It's never been cheaper to borrow money and will become more pressing. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Watford.
Now, a stunt motorbike rider has completed a daredevil feat on the River Thames in London. Travis Pastrana performed a backflip between two barges 23 metres apart. He had just 10 metres to stop to avoid falling into the river. And the trick was last attempted 11 years ago in Los Angeles, but the rider suffered serious injuries. Incredible pictures there. There he goes. Wow, and he safely lands. Still to come here on Sky News, more on the Prime Minister's tenuous position as some call for her to quit. And in the last few moments, she's spoken to David Cameron and he has pledged his support for Theresa May. More on that with Claudia Liza after the break.